Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my usual broadcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, who played 11 seasons in the National Hockey League with those New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. We come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey. And today our guest is Jan Levine of Hockey Buzz, who has written about the Rangers for a lengthy period of time here. And Jan, it's good to have you. We had you last season, and always appreciated your insight. And we're going to tackle a tough issue that Tom and I disagree on about whether the Rangers should make a move. So we'll get into that. But before we do, I want to get your take on, the more I watch the Rangers, the more I've become convinced that Shesterkin is not only the leading Vezina candidate, but I think he should be in the MVP race.
Yes.
Well, what is your thoughts on that?
Well, if you look at his numbers overall, right, and you look at some of the advanced metrics, I mean, we've been spoiled over the years, right? We've gone, and the Rangers fans have gone from Richter to Lundqvist to Shesterkin, right? Obviously, some bobbles in between and going way back. Obviously, when JD was the goalie as well, they've been pretty fortunate in terms of netminders and going way back with, Jacquemin and Villeneuve. They've had some pretty excellent goalies in their system. But you look at Shesterkin in terms of the heir apparent to Lundqvist, and it clearly is. And you look at some of the advanced metrics in terms of his goal saves above average and things of that sort, he clearly stands out. So if you're going to use that as kind of a demarcation point, noting him as a Vezina candidate is clear. MVP candidate possible. Clearly, as we know, goalies don't necessarily get a lot of votes as compared to forwards, just given the number of games they've played. And the one thing that may be kind of a detriment, he did miss some time, obviously, with an injury. He's had some leg woes over the year. If he does miss any more time, and given that that Gerard Gallant seems to want to go to Alexander Georgiev a bit more to keep Shesterkin fresh, that may be an impact in terms of him really being part of the MVP race.
I want to talk. Go ahead, Tom.
Speaking of goaltenders, too, Georgiev, it's kind of a forgotten story. At least the report was that he asked for a trade. That hasn't seemed to be an issue now. Are they going to do something with him, or is it too early to trade him?
I think you need to have a good backup. I mean, again, look, you have Kincaid, who's there also, who's fine, but I don't necessarily think they can be confident in terms of rolling him out. We know they have Adam Huska down in their system, and they have a couple of other guys, Tyler Wall as well, and then Dilla Garan, but those guys are well far away. But for this year, knowing that you need two good goalies to be able to survive the remainder of the season, and the myriad of cap room, which is, I think, Kevin, approaching about $10 million or so right now. So they're not in a position where there's an issue this year. Next year, when the Fox extension goes in, when the Zibanejad extension goes in, and when dollars are a bit more narrow in terms of the functionality you have in terms of ability to add guys, and the possibility of Ryan Strome and Georgiev being an RFA making $2.5 million, I think then we can move after the season and move him. And clearly, Edmonton's been a name that's been mentioned because they need goaltending. There's a handful of other candidates. So in terms of your question, I don't think they're doing anything this year. They're going to ride the course. They need to keep him. They don't have an issue with cap constraints this year. Next year, however, I would think come the offseason before the draft is likely when they try to move him.
Jan, what is your thoughts about goalie rest? When Henrik Lundqvist was the Rangers netminder, every year we had the national media tour, and he and I would get into discussion about one thing or another. And I remember one year we talked about how many games a goalie should be played. And this was probably 9 years ago, something like that. And at that time, he was of the mind that he wanted to play about 60 to 65 games. And since then, we've really backed off that. I think people saw Tuukka Rask make a long run after he had a season in which he only played about 50-some games. And I think people started to think, hey, it's better if a goalie is fresh. Do you think Shesterkin would benefit from more games off, or would you like to see him play, as close to 60 games as he possibly could?
So I think they rode him pretty hard early in the season, and he's a goaltender that clearly, like most elite goaltenders, wants to work, right? Lundqvist hated coming out. He hated sitting. Even when Antti Ranta was there, when Kem Talbot stood in for him when he got injured, he hated to sit, as you know, Kevin. But
right.
I think Shesterkin's kind of the same way. But given the issues that he's had with his leg issues, and given the groin issues that he's had, and given the concern that you don't want to overwork him, and then more importantly, as you talked about, right? Goalies making long runs in the playoffs, right? They always talk about a goalie being fresh, given the amount of work that they're going to get. And the Rangers system, unfortunately, just like the old system, rides their goaltending pretty hard in terms of the number of shots that are faced. I think they want to keep him fresher than usual. So I think the 50 to 55 range is reasonable. I do think as the season wears on and they may get closer in terms of staying where they are in the Metro, they may increase that workload a little bit, but I think they're pretty comfortable, especially since Georgiev has shown that with additional work, he plays a lot better, which is why they're going to try to get him between the pipes as much as possible rather than waiting 2-3 weeks at a clip for him to get a game action.
Listen, I don't disagree with you, Jan, at all, but I think back to Marty Brodeur, and I know that's going back to a different era, but he played all the time, right? He missed maybe 5 games a year, whatever it was, and the old goaltenders the same way. I just don't. And again, I understand that is the theory now. Even with he's talked so much, even with the team with back-to-back games, how tired they are and how the record is worse. I just think it's kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy where you talk about it so much that these guys are tired and don't play as well. I kind of, if you got a guy that's in great shape like Georgiev is, like Shesterkin is, Vasilevsky down in Tampa. These guys work hard. They're in shape. I just think they should be able to play more hockey. Again, I agree that this is the theory right now that they need to play less. I just don't necessarily agree with it, really. But
yeah, I guess it's the NHL's version of load management like the NBA has. I guess that's kind of the term we can kind of use. But look, I'm a believer. I'd rather see the guy in there, but I do think you can spot your backup goalie. You want to keep him fresh. So when the off chance you do need to use him where an injury occurs, right? Georgiev sat for weeks. They kind of had to throw him in the fire. When Shesterkin had the leg injury, he basically, rebuilt his trade value. I mean, his value was very low. I mean, they talked about a second round. There's some people thought a first rounder that thought was unrealistic, but even a second looked like a daunting task to get. But now what you look at the way he's played, come the offseason, presuming he doesn't have another bobble, the Rangers should be able to move him. I mean, they did it with Cam Talbot, though I think they didn't get enough for him. When they moved him, I think they'll probably be looking for, at least at a minimum, a similar return for Georgiev.
Yeah, I agree.
I actually agree with Tom on this with regard to, I'm old school. I like to see my goalies play a lot of games, and I think they take pride in it. I think it sort of inspires them. But let me play devil's advocate and talk about, Tom and I have had a lot of conversations about, as he called it, the self-fulfilling prophecy. We talk so much about back-to-back games and playing 3 and 4, where in his era, they enjoyed doing that. It meant no practice. But the difference is between a goalie and players is, your best forward is probably playing close to 20 minutes, but there's probably only 1 or 2 of them that are doing that. Most guys are playing less. You got 3 defensemen that are at plus 20 minutes, but the other 3 are in the 18 to 14 range. But a goalie's different. A goalie's playing all 60 minutes. He's on edge for all 60 minutes. He's not going to the bench and taking 2 shifts off and then coming out again. There probably is more fatigue and wear and tear, don't you think, guys, on a goalie? And it probably makes more sense for them to rest than regular players.
So I think the fatigue may be even more mental than physical, right?
Yes.
You need to be sharp for the entire game. You can't have a moment where you take off or you'll see the red light flashing behind you. So I think that is probably more, which is why, you talk about Lundqvist and the retirement jersey coming up. What he was known for more so than anything beyond his physical attributes was his mental, right? He was mentally sharp all the time. He was in the game. He was ready every single moment of the game. And when the moment was big, he rose to it partly because of his mental acuity. I think Shesterkin is kind of getting there. And I do think, they can ride him. And I think the plan is, as of right now, we'll get into trade possibilities. Presuming the Rangers stay where they are, the hope and the expectation is a decent playoff run, which is when you're going to need him to be his sharpest. So giving him some rest during the regular season to keep him fresher when the postseason arrives is probably paramount right now.
Yeah. Hey, Kevin, those blinds are childproof, I think. That's why you can.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm struggling with them. Yeah, for sure. I may call my granddaughter in to help me out.
Yeah. All right, let's get into this trade talk with the New York Rangers then. My theory, Jan, is that although I do think they should add some depth at forward and at defense, but I really don't want to change especially my top 4 defensemen. And certainly my top 6 forwards, I really don't want to touch. Again, I agree if they're going to go on a playoff run, they need to add some depth. But I just wouldn't be some of these names out there I'm hearing and giving up a lot to get them. Man, I like this team. And I know my first year in the National Hockey League, 1980-81, we went on a long run. We went to the semifinals, ultimately lost to the Islanders in the playoffs. But, man, I gained so much experience from that run. These young players they have in the team, if they are to go on a run and even potentially win the cup this year, I just think it's invaluable for those young players. So I wouldn't really be adding somebody that's going to, push somebody out of the lineup right now. That's my feeling. What do you think?
So there's a couple things. So we'll take it in a couple different specs. So first of all, I mean, I understand the viewpoint. I share the viewpoint to a certain extent, but I also think that they're in a position where they have a ton of cap room, which is not going to be the case moving forward. So if you're going to add, you're going to look to add rentals as opposed to guys you're going to need to sign long-term, right? So that's why guys like Joe Pavelski or Tomas Hertl make a decent amount of sense, because there's a good probability, especially Pavelski's case, he wouldn't be back next year. And Hertl, unless you're moving on from Ryan Strome or he gets too expensive, you wouldn't be able to re-sign him anyway, though it does give you a nice hedge if you can't add Strome or re-sign him to have him as your second-line center. The move of Pavel Buchnevich, and guys on my blog are tired of hearing it, I was a huge Buch fan, right? I really thought he had taken major strides under David Quinn, and you see what he's doing in St. Louis. I thought he was primed to take that next step. Now, part of it is they didn't think they can afford about the $5.5 million he's getting, which is why they moved on and got, in my opinion, a low return in a second rounder in Sammy Blais. And Blais would have been that potential second-line right winger, but he unfortunately tore his ACL due to, you can call it a slew foot or a dirty play by PK Subban, whatever term you want to use. But they're struggling with their top six, right? They're moving guys up and back. They've tried Barclay Goodrow on the right wing, where he's probably better suited for the third line. They've tried Philip Hedl, moving him up from center to wing. They've tried moving up and having the power line of Mika Zibanejad and Kreider and Artemi Panarin, with Kreider moving to the right side. You've tried Alexis Lafreniere on the left side on the first line. So they do need a top six or a top nine winger, especially one that can drive possession, because their 5-on-5 metrics in terms of shots per game at 5-on-5 is in the lower quarter of the league right now. Defensively, I mean, look, that third pairing, Nils Lundkvist clearly needed some AHL work. He went right from the SHL to the NHL. You can argue that Patrick Nemeth has been fine on the penalty kill, but going into the playoffs with him as your sixth defenseman is a little bit suboptimal right now. K'Andre Miller's another guy who struggled, though you can argue that his balancing against Jacob Trouba has helped Trouba, and Trouba's taken a massive step forward compared to what you saw, right? He's become that physical blue line. I don't know if he's kind of the Barry Beck that you guys had, Tom, but he's become that type of player where he's willing to be physical, but also has the offensive capacity that we saw in Winnipeg. So he's got everything. To me, the guy I would love to get is, look, Jacob Chychrun's been mentioned a lot, but you'd have to give up an inordinate amount to get him. I know Kevin's talked about Ben Chariot from Montreal, which would be a perfect fit. Allowed him to play the left side next to Trouba, move Miller down to your third pairing. Maybe you pairing with a Nils Lundkvist or a Zach Jones if either one of them don't go. And all of a sudden you'd have a nice balance between your, all three lines on your blue line, because you're probably not mixing up Lindgren and Fox given the way they've played. So I think the balancing is that you have a ton of cap room this year, which you won't have next year. You have guys like Kreider and Trouba possibly having career years that you have to take advantage of. You have younger kids that I know Hedl hasn't panned out like you want yet. Kakko hasn't panned out like you want yet. Lafreniere hasn't panned out like you want yet. You don't know what you're going to get from them, but they are getting the growth of playing major minutes. So I understand that as a balancing act. So my view is you do need to add. I don't know if you're adding around the edges. A Ryan Carpenter that's been rumored from Chicago helps. But in my opinion, you have to get a top nine winger, especially a guy who can slide onto the first or second line that can balance out the lineup. And if you get that team becomes a lot harder in the playoffs to go against the Carolina, which has had their number the last couple of years.
Yeah, I hear you with all that stuff too. But I still see them at the top of the standings, right? So yes,
agreed.
Yeah,
but you know what?
As well as I do, Tom. Playoffs is a whole other ball game as opposed to the regular season. We know how good the Tampas and the Carolinas are, especially in that conference. And you're going to probably have to go through at least one of them. And right now, as this team is constituted, even though they beat Tampa twice, I'm not sure in a 7-game series you have the depth to get through either one of them right now.
Yeah, I hear you.
I mean, you bring in Joel Pavelski, what are you really costing those young players? 5 minutes, 6 minutes?
Yeah, I know.
They're not going to play with the same players for sure, but, moving them down, they're still going to play. It's not like they're moving them out of the lineup.
So, but I look at the Rangers like one of 8 teams that say that are contenders to win the Cup. Right? If you look at the standings, that's roughly what it is. So what's that, 12.5% chance of winning the Stanley Cup based on that? I mean, I hear you about making the moves. I see it, but again, your chances of winning the Cup for any team is against you right now. Right? I mean, and
that's true.
Tampa and Carolina are clearly the elite right now, you would think, of that conference. So it all depends as what you, like you said, Thomas, what you have to surrender to get these guys, right? So if you're getting guys who are rentals, the cost is going to be mildly less than getting a guy who has term, right? So we talk, guys used to talk about Patrick Kane. I don't know if Chicago is going to move on from, or Jonathan Taves, right? And they've got cap constraints and they have to move them. But if you're going to get a team to eat cap room, first of all, especially for the future, you're also paying up in terms of the assets going to required. And I'm not advocating the Rangers go that direction at this point.
Well, if you're going to add a Patrick Kane, I'm going, okay.
Right.
Then that pushes you. Pavelski, does he push you that farther or that much closer to a cup? I guess he does, right? He's a better.
He's having
even the runs he's done in the playoffs. You've seen what he's done for San Jose and Dallas. He's definitely a difference maker.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. Well, I still stick by, Jan knows how I feel, and you do too, Tom. I'd like to see him try to get Sherratt for the defense. And, a guy like Lundqvist will be a bit better player at come playoff time than he is now. So, maybe he'll be
a better player in the playoffs.
Well, he'll be a better player later in the season, so we can see where he is.
Right.
And
what about Schneider? What are they doing with him?
Schneider's there. I mean, he's paired right now with Nemeth, right? And Schneider. I mean, Kevin, you correct me when he is proving that he is similar to what happened when Ryan Lindgren stepped into the lineup, right? Lindgren may not. Schneider has had clearly a lot more accolades than Lindgren did, when he was drafted and after the trade, right? He was viewed as kind of a throw-in in the Rick Nash deal, and he's proven to be clearly not the throw-in. Yeah. Granted, though, given you can say Ryan Spooner was turned into Ryan Strome, which worked out pretty well as well, but he's been the guy who's been the main component of that trade and morphed into a first-line blue liner. Schneider, in my opinion, I mean, he is the third of the right-siders, right? You have Fox, you have Trouba, and you have Schneider, right? And Schneider has been great. And if you can get a left pair defenseman to go with him, which is why I thought I'd like to see Miller paired with Schneider, because that would allow Miller to use his offensive skills. And we know he was a forward in the past before becoming a blue liner. And you get a good second line left pair like Sharrow to go with Trouba. And all of a sudden, those three combinations are pretty good come playoff time.
Okay, yeah. And then, so what do they have for depth then? They put Tenorti on waivers, right?
Tenorti's just going to go down to the AHL now, these past two waivers. You have Zach Jones in the minors, and you also have Matthew Robertson in the minors. Right. You have Nils Lundqvist in the minors. So they got a pretty good pipeline, which is why if they're going to make any kind of trade, one of those are the most likely guys to be moved in any kind of deal.
I'm just going back to Lundqvist. Do you think there is a chance that he'll be ready a little later in the season, or are we looking at him for next season?
I think the experience he's going to get playing 22 to 24 minutes in the AHL, seeing all situations shorthanded, even strength power play, is clearly going to help with his growth and development. Granted, he struggled the migration from the SHL to the NHL, which is no easy task for anybody, let alone being a blue liner in the NHL, right? So he's benefiting, or hopefully will benefit from it. I would say you got to give him at least 15 games. The benefit is, remember, trade deadline is late March. We have a while to wait, unfortunately, until we get there. So you'll probably know by mid-February if he's kind of on the ascent and what they want to do with him, and whether or not they think they can call him back up and have him be that left side blue liner, or they're going to keep him in the minors for a little bit further to let him marinate and get some more experience.
Yeah, tough thing for him is he's not going to get a lot of ice time being a right shot defenseman, right? We got Trouba and Fox there, right? So, yeah.
All right, Jan. Well, we appreciate having you on as always, and hope to have you back as we move closer to the trade deadline. I think the Rangers are going to be kind of in the middle of it. Even if they decide to do nothing, we're going to hear lots of rumors about them before they do nothing. So
absolutely,
yeah. All right. So thanks for jumping on with us.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Tom.
That was Jan Levine of Hockey Buzz, who writes a blog about the Rangers and knows his stuff, obviously. Tom.
I didn't know about John Redmiller being a forward before he turned to defenseman. I didn't know that. That was good stuff.
Yeah. No, he's he keeps on top of it, and I like his analysis of the team. He's not one of those bloggers that is always over the moon with his analysis. Sometimes it. In order to create interest, I think bloggers feel like they have to say something not necessarily outrageous, but something that separates them, from the pack. So
I didn't think of Pavelski. That's interesting. Thought of Pavelski come to the Rangers. Well, I guess that really does. So that pushes probably Strome back to the third line centerman then, right?
Yeah, but you raise a good point about Strome. I think Strome actually would be a much better third line center. Then he would be a top third line center.
Yeah.
But the connection with Panarin.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't deny that. So it's really going to be interesting. But that Rangers team is right in the middle of it. The problem is, and Jan alluded to this, and it's something you and I have circled around. Just trying to get through any of these rounds is going to be difficult. Like I love the Rangers team, but are they heads and tails above everyone else to the point that you think it'll be easy for them to get through? No.
Oh,
I think they can get through. I'm just saying it's not going to be an easy road, no matter who you face.
Yeah, no kidding. Pittsburgh, Carolina, Washington, Boston. Those are all like good hockey teams, like proven hockey teams too. Yeah.
Well, and I wrote about this just recently. It's hard for us because we do talk so much about Tampa Bay, and we're talking about Carolina as the upstart, and we're talking about Florida being hard to play against now, and they have such a great home record, which is somewhat ironic because they don't have a great fan base. Usually the home record comes from you have this intense, crowd that inspires you, and they don't really have that, but they're good. And then you come over to the Metro, and you've got the Capitals who have won recently. They got Ovechkin and Backstrom and John Carlson, and I'm not sure I trust their goaltending all that much.
I've heard some noise about them being interested in Fleury, right? That was a rumor.
I mean, they've sort of been, and they're always mentioned kicking the tires on a lot of different guys. Vander Kane, that came up the last week or so, getting that in there. So anyway, but I think, would you agree with the statement is the Metropolitan hasn't been as good as we thought it was going to be?
Ooh, really?
So, the Islanders have fallen. The Devils were supposed to be better than they are. The Columbus Blue Jackets are probably where the Philly has fallen. We were talking that there were going to be 7 teams, maybe all 8, that were going to be right in the middle of this.
Yeah.
And it really hasn't. We've already got separation. Like the 4 teams that we see there, and the order isn't exactly the way people had it, but the 4 teams that we see there likely are going to be the playoff teams.
Yeah, very true. I guess the teams at the top, I think, like particularly Carolina, I thought Carolina was good. I didn't think they'd be as good as they are. Pittsburgh, I thought Pittsburgh was going to have a hard time making the playoffs. They played way better. So the teams at the top, I think you're right. I guess it's the teams at the bottom that are disappointing.
Yeah, but the thing about the Metro that we talked about is there were going to be so many teams, and I don't think there are so many teams. I think it's turned out to be just a little bit different in that regard. Where we do I see 4 teams in the Atlantic that I think are very good. Mm-hmm. Tampa, Florida, the Toronto. No one talks about them, but they're pretty good. They're talking about adding a defenseman.
Yeah.
And then
I know they're up there in the standings, Toronto, but I just don't like their mix. I don't know what it is.
I think that's fair analysis until you do it.
Yeah.
So
I was the same way with Nashville, right? I didn't like the mix. Now they're playing better this year. So, is it a year? Is it about maturing and getting some of these young kids playing better? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about that Nashville plays a playoff style. I'm just not persuaded yet. I love how they're playing.
Yeah.
And I give them full marks for what they're doing. But if I'm starting to list of the 16 teams that are in playoff position down, ranking them in terms of their potential to win the cup, I've got Nashville near the bottom.
Well, to use my favorite player, Matt Duchene's playing so much better. I'd have to. Yeah. It's amazing how he must have listened to me, right? It took a while for him to sink.
Yeah, it did. It did. Sometimes, but you're not there every day with them. So.
That's true.
Oh man, I really am in the witness protection program here. So I just get in this more and more in the shadows. I got to figure this out. I don't know what the deal is here. Well, I hate messing with people's blinds when I'm not. It's not my home too. Right, so definitely, So you don't agree that Nashville needs to be near the bottom?
I thought that the surprising thing was that they hadn't played better the last few years. So this, to me, isn't necessarily a surprise where they're at, because I thought that's how good of a hockey team they were. I just thought they were underperforming so bad. I didn't like the mix. Now, for whatever reason, it's all come together with them. And you watch them play, they're that big, playoff type team, and they play that big game like Calgary was playing earlier in the year. They're really not doing it right now. But I actually, it's funny to say this. I actually believe in Nashville now because it looks like the light switch has gone on and they figured it out. But
Well, let's sort of go on the record here now. Let's look at the 16 teams in playoff positions like a power rankings.
Yep.
And I've got Nashville near the bottom of that group. Do you have them in the middle or up near the top? Or
I'd have them just above the middle. I think that they are.
So you'd have them like 7th out of 16 teams.
I agree. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I think that they've got the tools there. And it just seems that they figured out, and they're a big physical team too. When they play their game, they're that big physical team. That's, to me, those are the teams. It always goes this way. The teams they're like that, they have the good runs in the playoff, and I think that they're one of those teams that can do that.
Yeah, I'd like to see them 7th, but I just can't get there because I really like David Boyle, as you know, and I really like the city, and I love how much fun they have in the playoffs. But I obviously have Tampa, and I've got Florida, and I've got Carolina. I've got the Rangers ahead of them, so that's 4. I have Colorado ahead of them. That's 5. I probably have Washington ahead of them, 6.
Vegas. You mentioned Vegas.
I got Vegas, so I got 7 ahead of them.
Yeah. The Kings were in here the other night too. They played pretty well. Yeah.
Kings are my sleeper.
Yeah.
I've been told they're going to make some moves. They've been everywhere. Like, you see little notes. The Kings were here at this game here. Wow. The Kings are there, and they are really interested in making some deals to try to strengthen that team.
Well, they've got to do some of those silver helmets. So, God, that's
yeah. So I obviously would not have them above. So, but I've got 7 teams. So out of my 7, one of those teams you can't have up there.
Yeah, I know.
So who's the team you would leave out?
Right. And when you put it that way, Kev, you're right. I like Nashville, but when you mention those other teams, you're correct. I have all of them ahead of Nashville as well. So
I could see you can sort of make a case that maybe Nashville is with Washington now.
Yeah.
But those are the teams that we have here. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else that we really like. Minnesota. I don't like to discount them. They've been pretty consistent this year. I don't know what to make of the Pacific, to be honest with you. I think it's I know you like Calgary quite a bit.
I do. And it's funny because they're not playing that well right now. But the way they showed they could play, that's what I guess I keep going back to. It's interesting. I'm looking at the standings league-wide. So, and I didn't know this. Nashville is the 7th ranked team as far as points.
Right.
Right. So, they're not 7th ranked as far as winning percentage, and you rightfully so look at it. The winning percentage is probably more important than the points, but
yeah. Well, and that playoffs. I wrote a column that was entitled "Are the Predators the New Islanders?" That kind of team that when they get in the playoffs, boy, they're just going to be hard.
Yeah.
And what a difference one player makes. Tanner Jeannot. Who I don't know if this is true, but 3 or 4 days ago, he was leading rookies in goal scoring with 12 or 13, and he was 6th in the league in hits. Now, that is a nice combination for a rookie.
Yeah.
That is a nice combination. I don't know why people aren't, saying him rookie of the year. Like I see a lot of the 2 Red Wing boys, and they are very good. Right. But, the award is not for the rookie with the biggest potential. Right. The award is supposed to go to the guy that has the best rookie season.
Yeah.
And then, Seider has been great. Trevor Zegras has been great out in Anaheim. Lucas Raymond has been great. Yeah. But I say Tanner Jeannot has been great as well.
It's fun. And I'm not doubting you at all. I guess we probably don't pay attention to Nashville as much, right? Like Detroit, because it's more of a hockey city. People pay attention to Red Wings a little bit more, even though they're not. Yeah.
Well, and he's your type of player. He's a crash and bang type guy. And I watched him in the night that I had told you about how hard they were to play against. And on the forecheck, he just crushed Seider. Just crushed him. Seider, who's a big, tough kid, he had to leave the game. Now he was back in 5 or 6 minutes.
Right.
But they had to leave. I don't know if he went to protocol, or I have no idea what happened, or maybe just he had the wind knocked out of him. and he was back at it, because he's tough and he can take it. But he just crushed him, and a nice hit too. Nothing dangerous about it. He just caused him pain.
Just caused him pain. I like that. Caused him pain.
Just slammed him against the boards.
How about getting slammed? How about the Buffalo goalie? Was it last night?
Yeah.
I mean, that's embarrassing, though. You get hurt by a goaltender. We got to talk to that guy.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Goaltender.
Well, I'm sure the goaltenders union is all about that today. They're all talking about it. I'm sure. Giving support for that. So
and the goalie, he's got a hearing with the safety, player safety too, right?
Yeah, that's pretty funny, eh? Yeah. You actually remember? I don't remember that. I'm sure it's happened many times, but I tried to think.
I can't remember a time where a goaltender potentially gets suspended for.
Yeah, well, that's not true. I mean, I think Hextall got suspended.
Did he ever?
I think he did.
Back then,
I don't know that for sure, but you think back of the, I told you the great photo that we had at USA Today where he's holding a stick like he was an axe wielder.
I know. Well, remember it was when the playoffs to finals. They were playing Edmonton. It was Kent Nielsen. Was it Kent Nielsen? He chopped in the back of the legs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, but I don't remember him getting suspended for that though.
I don't know. I can't answer that with any certainty, but I feel like he must have.
I'll look it up. Yeah.
I feel like he must have been suspended. And the problem, we didn't have the Department of Player Safety back then.
Right.
So the process wasn't the same, although we did have suspensions. And, like Billy Smith probably deserved to be suspended.
Oh, yeah, I agree. But again, and you're right. I just can't remember them getting suspended, though. They certainly deserved it based on today's rules. But
yeah.
Hey, speaking of goaltenders, so Henrik Lundqvist on Friday night has his number retired here at Madison Square Garden. So
yeah, and which richly deserved, and he is really the embodiment of what you really want when you retire a number. Like I tried to tell people, this is my own feeling, but I think it's what they're going for. The honor of having your number retired speaks to level of play, but more importantly, the popularity of the player, his endearment to fans.
Yeah.
Like that's what I think.
Yeah.
Like we've seen players who are not great players, or not Hall of Fame players, get their number retired. And I'm totally fine with that if their level of popularity or, how endearing they were to the fans has reached the point where they're one of the most memorable players in franchise history.
Yeah, totally. So. And he's right up there in that Derek Jeter category too, like even beyond hockey, like the city of New York, the way he carried himself, the way he dressed, the way he looked, classy guy. Yeah.
Well, and he had both areas covered because in my mind, he's a Hall of Fame goalie too. So, I would say he's first ballot even, but people might argue with me on that. They might.
Yeah, and again, you're going to get the argument that he'd never won a Stanley Cup, but I think he goes beyond that.
Olympic gold medal, world championship. I think that covers that. And we're reaching the point too where that argument really shouldn't even be.
Yeah, I know.
Like if you do win it, you should get bonus points. But we got 32 teams now.
Yeah, totally.
So every season, 31 of them don't win.
I know. That's true, right? So Hextall got suspended for 12 games at the beginning of the 89-90 season. He gets suspended for 8 games in 1987. So yes, that's just off the top of the list here I'm looking at.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I couldn't remember for sure, but I would have bet that he was. Speaking of good bets,
yes,
the Pittsburgh Penguins now.
Yeah.
Have now won. I wrote this yesterday. So 17 of their last 19 games.
Wow.
That is a nice run.
Yeah.
17 out of their last 19 games.
Man, so wouldn't they be the surprise team? I know we talked about Nashville, but wouldn't that be the surprise team this year, Pittsburgh?
Well, I think so, but I think what we were forgetting, and this was the tone of my column, is we shouldn't have underestimated them because A, they still have Crosby and Malkin.
Right.
2, they're the Penguins.
Yeah.
They have that culture that you like so well.
Yeah.
You're expected to win there. They play a certain style. They get players to fit that style. and they have high expectations, and anything short of that is
That is true, right? You're not going to compare like Phil Kessel, who you could argue other places where he's played has underperformed, but when he went to Pittsburgh, he played his best hockey, right? Yeah,
yeah, he did, and he was very good in the postseason. And Jari has played terrific this year. Like we've talked about, Jan brought it up, and it's become one of my favorite statistics is goals prevented above the average goalie. And Shesterkin is leading this season with 38 of those. And on the other end of the scale, we see goalies like Korpisalo, and I'm trying to think who else was down near the bottom, Grubauer in Seattle. Those are minus players. So they take an average player, and then I think Grubauer is a -8. He's 8 goals worse than an average NHL goalie. So, and Korpisalo is too. And there's a lot of negative goalies. But Jari is up there. He has had a lot of goals above goals prevented above the average, and I think he is sort of almost washed away. Now, saying that, the minute we get to the playoffs, one of the first stories that'll be written is, well, what kind of Jari are we going to get? The one we had the last 2 regular seasons, or the one that performed last year in the postseason when people said they had it going on. But Jari, I thought, has played very, very well. And I think Mike Sullivan is a real plus as well.
I know, yeah.
So,
and we talked about that the other day. There was rumors, and maybe just rumors, that he was going to get fired as coach. Now he's, I would argue that he could be coach of the year, right? Because he's done with that team. I agree.
Yeah. So, there's a lot to like about that team. And, they always seem to find the Brian Russ and Rodriguez, guys that, either have failed in other attempts to, play in other teams, or they've gotten out of college, or, that sort of thing. So, and they've got a few of guys like that. So.
Hey, yesterday I had the Sully Salt women on, your Michigan friends there.
Yeah, I actually saw a bit of that.
Yeah, they're going to have the next salt that they're coming out with is No Time for Tom.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, because I mistakenly, the first show we did with them, I listed time as one of the ingredients of one of their salts. It is not. Time is not one of the ingredients, and I've been reminded of that several times. So we're a little play on words there. So No Time for Tom, THYME.
Okay, all right. And what is the strategy behind that one?
It's going to be spicy. It'll be spicy. That's why.
Okay. You bring heat to all of your meals?
You know what? I think I do now, pretty much. Not all of them. I wouldn't say all of them, but quite a few of them. Yeah, either Frank's Red Hot sauce or that kind of stuff for the salt. I'm out of the Sully salts. I got a new shipment coming. So.
Okay. All right. Great.
Do you still have your Sully salts? Are you still using it?
I do. Yeah, we use them when they're up in our. We just have an overflowing spice deal. We have too many spices, and then my wife makes some spices. So there's bags and jars of. Oh,
she makes her own spices too, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She'll mix stuff together, and that kind of thing. So, it's always speaking of that, we're my wife is actually coming into Chicago here too, and my son and daughter have found this restaurant in Chicago where they have a full regular menu but they can turn anything vegan.
Oh, wow!
So
you can order whatever. It may not be vegan, but they'll make it into vegan.
They'll make it into vegan. So in other words, if you ordered their 4-ounce hamburger, you'd end up with a vegan burger.
Oh, nice.
If you ordered, a egg omelet, they'll give you, the fake eggs. And
have you ever had one of those Beyond Burgers? Those vegetarian.
My wife eats them regularly, and she likes them. And Impossible Burgers, she likes as well. Although, the oddity of that, there's more calories in an Impossible Burger than a regular burger.
Oh, okay.
So,
but it's all vegetables, all right?
It's all plant-based for sure.
Right, all plant-based.
All plant-based. So, yeah.
So somebody, I think, finally, is Kevin in the witness? Well, Thomas, come on, you gotta work on your spelling a little bit there, but I mean, we love you, but we're loyal listeners. But is Kevin?
Just forgot an I. So
Right. We have one of our followers, Ira Matthew. He's famous for not being able to spell too, so maybe he's just watching him. Oh, so before I forget too, before we go, so the girls hockey team and I posted this that I'm coaching. One of the players on our team, Peyton Jelinek, is up for Player of the Week in the FCAC. And our team is up for Team of the Week, too. So if you guys get a chance to go on my Facebook page and go to the link and vote for us, that'd be fantastic. So,
what did she do? Did she score some goals? Or
got a hat trick in one game. And she's been on a scoring streak. Again, one big game we won, I think 9-1. She got a hat trick in. And she's been scoring pretty much in every game, too. So she's a good player, too. It's funny because at the start of the year, her mother at the team meeting for the parents, we didn't know her at all. She started talking about she gets quite a few penalties. She's really controlled herself this year and really playing well, but she's got some fire to her too. So yeah.
Well, you gotta love that. So how many goals does she have this year?
I don't know. She's got to be gotta be close to 10, I would think, because she scored some early. We weren't scoring a lot of goals before. Now we're really starting to score some goals. So
that sounds like a hockey name too, Jelinek.
Yeah, and her father he's Czech. But he spent some time living in Canada. They lived in Minnesota for a while, so she's been in the hockey world for a while. So very good. Our girls are really getting better and better all the time. Fun to coach.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Well, we appreciate everyone for tuning in, not only today but on Monday, and we'll be back next week. If you want to read me, I'm at DetroitHockeyNow.com and also HockeyBuzz.com.
And if you want to listen to the radio version of this show, you can go to radio.co at 365 Sports. Again, that's radio.co at 365 Sports. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.